now going to be required to have signed before a buyer crosses a threshold. Buyer agency and working with real estate agents. This loop I'm setting up for you guys, we expect you to go in and set up folders. And every time you show a buyer a house, there should be a folder in there with their name as a prospective buyer. We don't know what they're going to buy yet, okay? But in that folder should be that buyer agency agreement signed, and you're working with real estate agents. You with me? That has to be done. Once they decide on the property and you create your loop that is the property specific, then all you have to do is copy those two things over into your other loop with the property contracts and the template. Is everybody okay on that? You understand? So if Billy and I or Julie go into Gwen's loop that says, her title buyer prospects, and we don't see any folders and we see no buyer agency agreements, no working with real estate agents, what are we assuming Gwen is not doing? She is not showing any houses to any buyers. You get it? You get it? Okay? Because if the commission calls and says, we want to audit, which they can do and will do, they want to be able to look at that loop in dot loop and see how many of those you have. They are assuming there's going to be people in there that you may never go under contract with. I'd love it if y'all converted 100% of it. That'd be great. But we're going to assume that there's some that just don't pan out. But you should still have those two documents in that folder. Buyer agency agreement signed, working with real estate agents. What do we know about the buyer agency agreement in terms of the time, the term of the agreement? There you go. So if you were working with someone for the weekend for the first time, make it for 2 days if you want to. You just have to remember to renew it, right? You got to renew it if you move on, okay? You do not have to do the buyer agency agreement for 6 months or 3 months. You do it for 2 days, all right? So after Thursday, Friday morning, you will each have a loop set up, okay? And the only thing that goes in that loop, please do not load anything else in that loop, but just your buyer agency agreement and you're working with real estates. That's it. That's all that goes in there. Okay? Everybody, are we square on that? By the way, Julie, when she does her dot loop minutes, the next one, Tuesday, she does just a real quick 15-minute dot loop tips. She's actually going to show you some things that will help you kind of move documents around. Okay. All right. So dot loop setup. Billy mentioned the buyer packages, which will allow you to start showing value to people about what you're going to do. Guys, buyers don't expect you to work free. If you have any trepidation about getting the buyer agency agreement signed right up front, it's up here. It's not because that's what they have a problem. It's up here. So remember, you show value for what you do. There are 3 things every buyer I've ever met wants. They want a selection of houses to look at. So are there houses for sale outside of MLS? If you're a good buyer's agent, do you just look at MLS? No. You look at FSBOs, you drive through a neighborhood, you send out letters, you find selection for people, okay? The second thing a buyer wants is they want to know that you can make it smooth, make it easy for them, show them what your process is going to look like. What's your negotiation process look like? Have that in your buyer package. Show them what this looks like. If you're not sure what that looks like, you need to get with Billy or I to talk about your buyer package. Okay. The third thing a buyer wants is they want the best deal they can get. So that's where we go back to the negotiation strategy. If you show them you have one, you're already adding value. Okay. Once you do that with a buyer, you illustrate those three things to them, you should have no problem getting a buyer agency agreement signed, even if it's just for a day or two. Okay. You don't have to marry him. You can date first for a few days and then just renew it. It's not the bachelorette. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So is everybody, we have opportunities here, by the way, because there's a lot of agents out there that they're looking at all this as an obstacle instead of an opportunity. This is a huge opportunity. You've all heard me say this. My pie just got bigger. I will capture business from agents down the street because they are afraid and don't know how to present. And it's just about being prepared. Just be prepared. I'm not any better. I just have all my ducks in a row. So I know what I need to say. Okay. All right. The last thing that I want to say before we jump into the rules, I want to show the website Elizabeth's been working on, because this is what's going to happen. August 1, we're going to start sending out e-cards to all the agents in the MLS. Okay. And we're going to direct them to that buyer agents commissions tab. Jules, if you'll click on that. Every listing we have will show what the commission is that's being offered at the top. You guys see that? We are going to make it really simple for agents to see what is being offered. Okay. Now, here's what we need from you to help Elizabeth, because Elizabeth has to manually enter these each week as they're coming in. If you have a new listing, you have to communicate with her to let her know what the MLS number is and what the commission is that's being offered. The email, the preference would be that you send her a note in Dotloop. If you are out and about and you cannot use Dotloop, then you need to send it to compliance@openthebluedoor.com. Compliance@openthebluedoor.com. As soon as you have a new listing, you need to notify her what the MLS number is, what the address, and the commission being offered, if there is any. Okay. If the seller has said zero, they're not offering anything, it's not going to show up on this page. It'll show up under our listings, but it won't be on this page, because this is just going to be there to show agents what the seller is willing to cooperate to do. That makes sense? And we will be sending out e-cards through Constant Contact once a week for the next probably 6 or 8 weeks to agents. And all it is this big bold thing, open the blue door / buyer commissions. Go here to see what's being offered. Okay. We're going to keep it simple. All right. All right. So compliance at open the blue door. If you have a seller that wants to change their commission for some reason, you have a form that you have always used that Julie's going to go over. Okay. All right. So does anybody have any questions about what this is, how we're going to communicate, what you need to do between now and August 1st to be ready? And then after that, it's really just understanding the forms and making sure you have your buyer package ready. All right.
When you send the folders for the buyers for, having the real estate agents there and the buyer agency agreements, can we just do or loops like we normally do and set them up, because that's what I usually do with buyers. Instead of sticking them in the folder, I put their name in the loop and then I do it, and then once they're under contract, I change the name into the.
I understand what you're doing. The problem for us,
You can't see it.
we don't, we can see it, but we can't go to 48 different loops to check.
I'm good if you do both. It just has to be in that other.
Well, you might as well,
Okay.
yeah. I'm just telling you, I only want to go one spot and look for y'all.
Okay.
And it's in that buyer prospects. Okay. If you want to do it the other way too, that's great.
Usually when I have to sign that, I have to sign everything.
That's fine. So copy it over into the one that I've set up for you. But guys, the only reason why that buyer agency date should mimic a contract date is how?
Yeah.
Because you showed them one house, one day, and wrote it up. Those dates should never match unless that happened. Does that make sense? Buyers never cross the threshold now after August 1st without a buyer agency sign and a working with real estate, period. End of story. Okay. MLS thinks they're going to police this and fine. We don't know yet what they think, how they think they're going to do that, other than with complaints filed. But I'm just going to tell you, the commission is who will be looking at this. I'm not as worried about MLS as I am about the commission wanting to audit. Okay. So we just need to embrace it and go with it. We'll be fine. Okay. All right. Yeah, Jerry.
Yes, you need existing buyers will look like that, and
No.
that's just
Yeah. Yeah. All we need, Jerry, that's a good question. Just make sure that you get that, the 715 sign, and put that in your current loop.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would also, and of course, as soon as you guys put them under contract now moving forward, I'd go ahead and use the 220 compensation form. Okay, just go ahead and start it now, and Julie's going to talk about it.
One more thing, topic. Open houses, people come in and start talking. We don't have to work in the real estate or an agreement with them, but we start talking. Mm-hmm. When does that kick in? You know,
that hasn't changed. It's still first substantial contact. So if the buyer, somebody comes into your open house and starts sharing lots of information with you, you need to have, do I have an echo in my ear? I actually do know this stuff.
I'm thinking out loud.
So just make sure you have the working with real estate agent brochures at your open house, so that you can go ahead and give them that and have them sign it, bring it back, upload it into your prospect loop, you know, and then you can send out the buyer agency if you feel like you need to. You guys may still be showing properties as a seller sub-agent, right? You know, Jerry, I'll use you as an example. Maybe it's Briarcliff and somebody comes in there, wants to look at Briarcliff, decides they like Briarcliff. Well, you're acting as a seller sub-agent, right? So you may not have a buyer agency agreement, but the working with real estates hasn't changed. That's still got to happen at first substantial contact, okay? But that one loop is going to house stuff like that. All right. All right. Any other questions? All right. Now Jules is going to jump in on all the forms.
Fun with forms. All right. You guys got to package stuff and keep it in order, because we're going to go in order. And the first thing you guys have, you don't have them? Oh, no. Oh, we want in order? There you go.
Okay, thank you.
The first thing you have is a summary of change. Billy's. And this is what we're going over today, but I'm not going over this in order. So this is more of a reference for you when we leave here today. We're going to look at the changes and talk about them, but I'll put it in an order that makes sense to me, not like on a piece of paper. So you guys have it to refer when we get back. Also this afternoon, I'm gonna email this all to you guys. You see how like Form 2T off of the purchase and contract is blue and underlined? When you see that in a PDF, that's a link to the markup of the form. So if you want to compare the old form to the new form, you just click on the title and it'll take you straight to it. So I'm going to email that to you guys again, so you guys have it as a reference. If you're wanting to see what changed, if you want to see what's different. So the first, and that's all we're doing with paper right now. Everything is up here today. The first kind of set of forms, if you will, that we're going to go over are just some quick, very quick form changes that were going to happen anyway. Nothing to do with the NAR settlement. But we guys know once a year that they have to make some tweaks and some changes. We want to make sure we're good with those first before we get into the contract forms and the agency forms. So the first big change to buyer possession before closing, they kind of redid the language. Unbelievable. Correct. All we're looking at right now is a summary. No more paperwork for now. The first change they made, the second provision here, they just reworded it. If you guys are doing a buyer possession before closing, whenever your buyer moves in, they waive all rights to due diligence. So if we're in due diligence and they take possession, that ends due diligence. And this paragraph is reworded to kind of re-emphasize that. Questions on that?
Say no.
Well, I don't know what happened to it. Another change they made too was the additional provisions addendum. Again, nothing major. With the septic system installation modification provision, the second one there, they used to specify this just used to reference 2T. They took that out. So now you can use this for 12T as too. You're dealing with vacant lot and land, and you want to do a septic inspection or modification, we can now use the additional provisions addendum to attach to 2T and 12T. Questions?
That's a good change.
Agreement to amend the contract. They added a provision to add a buyer. So this was good news, right? So if you put a buyer or spouse under contract and then later the lender requires a co-signer to be added, we don't have to change the offer to purchase and contract. We can just add the co-signer or whoever the lender requires, go straight to the agreement to amend the contract. I agree so far. Because this just came up. I mean, it's funny how timely this stuff is. Possibly another good change. Seller estimated net sheet. Down here at the bottom, they gave you a place for the seller to deduct the due diligence. They already received that when we went under contract. And you'll notice that's a debit to the seller and the CD. So when we're figuring out how much the seller, when we're helping our seller figure out our net, we need to have them take into consideration that that due diligence fee won't be part of their net. They've already received that money. So that's another good change. Questions on that? Some closing guidelines for the sellers. This is a brand new form. I think I've added this one to the loop. I'll double check. I'm pretty sure I added this to the seller templates. So when you add a seller template going forward, this is now here. And this is be a great, because we got to tell the seller a lot, you know, turn off utilities, stop your insurance, you know, transfer this, disconnect that, all that. So this is nice little handy dandy checklist that we can use when discussing these services with our sellers. And it is a brand new form.
That would be a really good presentation.
Yeah.
There you go. Closing guidelines. Send it to you. Dipping right along. A couple of determination forms. There's this one, and then there's another one, but they all made the same change. Let's see. The edit they made is just a technical edit. It's to make clear that the seller's not agreeing to the buyer's reason for terminating. They don't necessarily have to agree with it, but what we are asking them to do is release the earnest money. And before it said the seller agrees and releases. Now it pretty much just says the seller is releasing the earnest money. So they're not agreeing that the buyer's terminating, but they are agreeing to release the earnest money. I guess that was just a technical. Referral agreement made a little change. It's now going to specify when it is due and payable. So it's going to tell us that we've earned our commission when we connect buyer and seller, but we're not going to get paid until the end of the transaction or this referral agreement expires. So if you're doing an outgoing or an incoming referral, we're just more clear. Again, just a technical change. So far, so good. This is the easy part. Our favorite form. No, it's a good professional services disclosure. Just a quick change here. They added the option for not just septic inspection, but now it's septic and sewer inspection. So they can waive or select that service. Again, just to be more clear.
Very quickly have Lorraine talk about why this form is so important. When you have, like, for instance, an appraisal or paying cash. So Lorraine, would you share that one story?
Yes, I had a client who decided she didn't want any inspections or any survey. A year or so down the road after they closed, she got into it with a neighbor about fence and reported me yeah, to the real estate commission. Fortunately, I had her signature saying that she had waived survey, or my butt would have been in big trouble. So I was very thankful that I had her sign.
Yeah, that quick close that complaint.
Yeah, that's all it took.
Yeah.
It was agonizing for the time it took, but yeah.
And just a quick reminder, I mean, this form isn't a substitute for explaining why these services are important. So we're not just handing them saying, you figure this out. We're having a conversation about why the inspections and the appraisal and that kind of thing are important as well. All right. That's all I have, just non-NCAR, non-contract forms. So again, just a couple quick little changes. I knew that section would go fast. Now, go back to your packets. And the next page, you guys have page 4 of 101, the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. So 101 is circled at the bottom. This is page 4. Couple changes on this one. If we look at page 4, well, luckily you have the handout.
Yep. So I think that what you guys need to be aware of on the listing agreement, other than, of course, they understand that compensation is not required. If you look at the middle of the page in bold on page 4, you'll see that they're initialing that the compensation is not required. This is everywhere now. Okay, so that's one of the big changes. And then up at the top, you'll see also again in bold that the rate of real estate compensation is not fixed by law, but is set by each broker individually. One of the things that is being suggested to us, because we all have a percentage or a flat rate or whatever we feel like we as professionals charge to list and sell a property, right? There isn't a standard. So if I got a call to go to a listing and I said, well, I charge, your house is 300,000, I charge 3% just to list and market to get it closed, right? Then that's my choice. That's my business decision, right? We still can choose what we want to charge. That we are still in business. So you can choose, you could say, I'll charge $5,000 to do it. That's up to you professionally to make that call. Now, if they don't agree with you and want to negotiate, then that's their right. They can say, well, no, I don't want to pay $5,000, but I'll pay you $4,000. Okay. It's a negotiation again. And the more prepared you are with what you offer to do for them, the less likely you will meet resistance on what you charge. Okay. But just be aware that it is still your decision what you charge to list a property for, to market it, not what they might or might not pay for a buyer's agent. That's a separate whole animal now, right? Okay. So when you are presenting things to a seller, you are only talking about what you charge to market and bring a buyer and close out that property for them. That's it. Okay. Everybody good? No more talking about what they might offer, what they don't, this is what I would recommend you offer. No more talking like that. No, yes, as a buyer incentive, Carmen, that's right. No more making recommendations about what they should or should not do. If they ask, your answer, and I get where you're going with this, Treva, because technically, and this is just my opinion, okay? I am not saying that this is right. Technically, I think that it's incumbent on us to give them advice. But I will tell you, that's a violation of the settlement of this lawsuit. So if somebody asks you, well, what should I do? My response is going to be, what do you think you should do? What do you think you need to do in this situation? Now, I'm going to tell you what Billy told me, because he's already started going through this with sellers. Most of them already make up their minds and say, well, why would I offer anything less than this? They won't come and show my house. Well, Billy didn't say that. They said that. Okay. And if they say, well, I think I'd like to offer 2%, okay, then that's what we'll put in here. Okay. We are not giving them our opinion. All right. I know that's going to be challenging for some of us who have been doing this a while, but you're just going to have to get comfortable with saying, I don't know, what do you think would be right? You know your budget. Okay. Okay. All right. Good question. All right. What other, I don't have my highlighted one in front of me.
Right, because the highlight disappeared. A couple other changes on 101. Again, just kind of technical stuff. Back up to the screen. No more paper. Back up to the screen. They added, when we talk about the earnest money, we talk about the due diligence fee. What happens to that money if, we don't close, But then more importantly, they added a place here where who is going to collect the due diligence fee. So it's not always just Mr. and Mrs., right? It could be the state with the spouses and So if, 8 people are selling it, we may not necessarily be writing that due diligence check out to 8 people. So who is actually going to receive that due diligence fee? If it's different than who's listed as the seller. So we're going to specify who listed that.
This is an appropriate time also, guys, to tell you that you cannot load anything into MLS about compensation. You can't load a 220.
Yeah.
You can't prepare in advance and have a Form 220 filled out because your seller said I'll pay 2.5%, and you load it into MLS in the documents. You can't do that. The only thing they are now allowing us to do, Elizabeth found out, we can now, in the public remarks, we can put a live link to our website. So now they'll be able to go right to that page, the home page. But at least they see buyer commissions on the home page. So we can now brand a little bit by putting the website in the public remarks.
What about closing incentives for like for vendors?
Concessions, yep. Concessions are different. You can still list concessions in the remarks. Nothing that references compensation. Okay. All right. And it can be tied. The concessions cannot be tied to paying an agent. It's simply, yeah, this is what you get. Okay. What you do with it, up to you.
Yeah.
All right.
So you like,
Yep, that's correct. Yep, nothing about compensation in MLS. All right. That's where we're going to all be using our website and marketing to put out there what we're offering. Okay. Right.
Another quick update in the listing agreement. When we're talking to the sellers about flood hazards, they also included wetlands and flood insurance disclosure. So again, just gathering more information. You know, a lot of the listing agreement is kind of like what they call it, the jump start for conversation, because we know this stuff shows up in the offer to purchase and contract as well. So when a buyer comes along, we're going to want to have this information. So we can kind of use this as just a big checklist to make sure we're covering everything with the seller now. So we have those answers. So not that we have much wetlands around here, but they added it. And then that flood insurance disclosure. And then the last thing on the listing agreement, we have the seller indicating if they are not working with a relocation company. Apparently there were some agents that were blindsided. So now we can ask the seller, you are working with a relocation company, and figure that out in the listing agreement. And that's all with the listing agreement. And by the way, those same changes were made in the exclusive right to sell listing agreement for vacant lot and land. So if you're using that listing agreement, we can see those same changes.
How many of you have current listings now in MLS? Okay, so a lot of you in the room have that. So this week, when you go to get that Form 715 signed, you know, make sure that you explain to these sellers, you know, after August 1, there may be agents showing the property that are going to be sending over that 220, that compensation form, because they're going to be sending it over to make sure that it's signed prior to them showing the house. You with me? I know that seems cumbersome. Guys, if you want to go ahead and have some of them prepared and the seller sign them, you can do that. You just can't put it in MLS. And then when you get the request for showing, or you can send your own over that's signed, but you can't load any of that into MLS. All right? Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
I'm like, no pre-filling. And I'm like,
Yeah.
It would be so easy to just pre-fill.
Yeah. And then that way you got one you can share. Okay. Just not
in one, you can download it and then
yeah. Okay.
So the seller might constantly be bored.
Yes, that's right. Okay. All right, Jules.
Okay. So that one. Then we have our buyer agency agreement. Funnily enough, we didn't have many changes in preparing for this settlement. I have heard attorneys and people talking about this stuff, saying that North Carolina came into this settlement in really good position, because our buyer's agency agreement was pretty much good to go, just a couple tweaks. Y'all, there are states that don't have or didn't have and are frantically working on creating a written buyer agency agreement. So North Carolina, we are steps ahead at this. And I was surprised how few changes we actually saw in the buyer agency agreement. Before I get to the compensation piece, they took this first. This used to be one run-on paragraph, one long paragraph. They took it and split it up. So now we can talk about, you receive the working with real estate agent disclosure. You just disclose you're not working with another firm. They just kind of gave us bullet points to make it easier to have these conversations instead of that one big paragraph. And then the compensation of the firm, they moved that up, and you guys, I think, yeah, you have that. This is your next piece of paper, which is page 1201. Evidently, there's still a problem with people putting NA or 0 in the commission field. Y'all know how much you're going to get if you put 0 in? Okay, all right, so.
I can tell you from personal experience, attorneys starting to ask for the buyer agency agreement.
They do.
Because they want to know what you agreed to pay, regardless of what the seller said.
And if you put transaction fee in there too, the attorney will ask for a copy of it so they can see that it's in there in an agreement.
Fill it out. Well, it's a binding agreement. It's a contract. It's an employment agreement. So unless you plan to do your job for free, you need to have it filled out properly.
So I have a question because I'm so analytical. Going for the last month, whatever property I was shown, because of the changes, I put the property address and then what was about the spiel and then download the sheet. You know, so I mean, is this technically should we still put 3% resale about this? It's going to change.
It is going to change, Carmen, and that's a good question. In the compensation field there where you see in your page it's yellow, that's what we have always put in, or that's what we had always advised that you put in, right? 3% resale, 2.5 new, 5 for land, yada yada. To Carmen's point, it's now becomes it, you know, because it's always been negotiable, but now everybody knows it's negotiable. So you very well may make a decision. This is what I professionally want to charge. But when you sit down with the buyer, if that buyer says, well, I can't pay that, can we negotiate that fee? Well, of course you can. That's up to you guys. You can negotiate all you want, okay? You just need to make sure that this document reflects whatever it is you've decided to do, okay? Because to Billy's point, you may be sending this to a closing attorney, and that needs to be accurate.
If we fill this out the way it is filled out, have the conversation with the buyer. The buyer says, well, I can't do 3% or whatever the case may be. I might be able to do 1%. And can we negotiate that after the fact? Because if we do not put the 3% in and say a seller is worth 3% and we put 1% down, we're only getting 1%.
If you can do that, if you can get the buyer to agree to that, that's great. If the buyer says, well, no, I'm not signing that unless we agree to the compensation up front, then you'll have to be more specific. Okay. That's really going to depend on the buyer that you're talking with.
So we can change it after.
Just remember, you guys, all points of commission and compensation need to be in agreement in writing before we present that offer. So we have to have all this figured out, signed in writing before we present the offer. Listing agent, before you present it to your seller, we have to have that commission. So by the time we get to the offer, commission should be behind us.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is the new rule is that if you only have say 2% and they're 1%, and then say you take your buyer to a house that's, you know, they're offering 3%, you're not entitled to that 3% now because you can't go in and do that. What I'm saying is that if the buyer is telling me, well, I can't afford that, and obviously to get someone to a home, I'll take the 1% if that's what they can afford. But now if the seller's offering 3%, I'm not allowed to take the 3%. I'm only allowed to take 1%.
Well, you can renegotiate. I think the important thing to remember, guys, all these before the contract.
3%.
All these things are negotiable. All you have to do is do an agency renewal and amendment
And
to
you're,
that form.
and you're amend the
Yes.
percentage, okay.
Yep, and then you're just gonna put in subject property seller paying X.
Okay,
Buyer doesn't owe anything,
okay,
whatever,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Yeah, no, you put it, no, once that's been ratified, then that's a binding contract. So you have to do a renewal or an amendment. Yeah, do an amendment, Pam, because then you are not changing a binding contract, you're just amending one.
So you don't think that we should put that in that form first and then negotiate if they can't afford and, say they're only offering 1%?
I think you have to decide what you want to charge,
Okay,
okay? You put that in. If it needs to be changed before the contract, then change it,
okay,
okay?
yeah, that sounds good,
All right?
because I'm not gonna not,
Sure.
if they can't only afford 1%, no one's giving anything, then obviously I'm not gonna stop getting their home.
You just add unless seller offers more.
You can't,
No, and guys, I think the important thing, don't get bogged down in this, because this is all gonna be really fluid. And as long as you guys do an amendment, as long as you amend this agreement, because let's say the buyer says, I can only pay Jessica $2,000. That's it, that's all I've got. And Jessica says, okay, I can do that. However, if I do show you a property where the seller is paying 3%, then I will need to, before we make the offer, I'll need to amend this so that I get paid by the seller instead of by you. Is everybody clear on that?
that sounds better.
But you can have a whole bunch of amendments if they don't.
Yes, you could. That's the reason why you're gonna get that Form 220, Pam, signed by the sellers. That way, then at least when you have it nailed down to a property, then you go back.
I'm just saying because you have to make some offers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I can't tell you that it isn't gonna be convoluted. Yeah. Yeah.
Checklist.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is like, just be sure you cover everything up front.
Yeah.
What you understand. Let them know and know that they know. Don't just slide through.
That's right. You're gonna have to spend time on your buyer consultation. You can't just go and meet them and, shove it in front of their face. You're gonna have to discuss it. Okay? All right.
The back of that page. Again, this hasn't changed much, but just kind of reworded it. Any, suggestion about the seller is to pay, anything like that, that has all been reworded. And now we have the buyer, similar to the listing agreement, we have the buyer initialing that they understand that our services are not free. If listing firm or seller agree to pay, then a portion of that purchase price will be paid to the listing firm, etc. So just added that verbiage. And then they gave us a couple other forms, 770 and 220, that we're getting ready to look at. Like you guys just said, that paperwork, that making sure you have that paper trail. So they got the paperwork for us. And that was all on the listing, on the buyer's agency agreement. If it went for NAR, there would be nothing. So I was pleasantly pleased by how little it had to change for us. So just make sure be familiar with the forms. And as you're presenting them, I'm a big fan of allowing the forms to help you put words in your mouths when you're having these conversations with buyers and sellers.
I do think, to Julie's point, we get kind of lazy because we all use electronic. So we send it to them and say, please read it, but we don't really discuss it. So I think we're going to need to spend a little bit more time making sure that people get questions answered, right? Even if you're sending it to them electronically, have a phone conversation with them. You're going to have to make sure people understand more. Because just as Carmen said when she got here, people don't read. They just sign. If you build trust, they just sign. So you got to spend a little more time.
And to that I'm not a client, it's a judge.
They read everything.
And she thought I was not feeling good. And I mean, as I sent her the pre-listing documents, and then, you know, her first thing was this NAR settlement. You know, I said, buy your incentive, you know, it's totally up to you if you want to offer it. And she said, well, what would she offer? I said, no. I can tell you what my services are for the seller, the listing agent. Now we can discuss, you know, further, and you know what I'm doing. Then from the buyer's perspective, theirs might be different. So it's up to you what you want to offer. And I was surprised what she wanted to offer. I was like, all right, Judge, like, you're really doing it. But, and also I do know NAR did some videos last week that are going to come out to have a classmate that's in it of the settlement. Very good. And from what I was told, we are one of 18 states that are above the game because we already had buyer agency.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as I think you'll be surprised at what most sellers are gonna say. Most of them are gonna wanna pay.
Yeah.
Because they wanna get their house sold.
I had a listing appointment last week and the guy said, I've just heard all this news information. Why would I pay $100? And I said, what do you think?
It's hard. That's right, it is hard. Yep. All right, Jules, what's next?
Up next is the next piece of paper you have. This is the cooperating compensation agreement. Now, we looked at this one a couple meetings ago. Since we looked at it, they have totally redone it. It's a totally redone form. They've even changed the name. I think it used to say something about cooperating commission or something. I don't know, but they've redone the whole thing. This is the form that we're going to use if you want to show a property. If you want to show a property, and you call the listing agent and say, "Are you paying me?" and they say, "Oh yeah, I'll pay you," you going to take them at their word? No. So what are we going? How are we going to get that in writing? Ta-da! This is that 220. This is our cooperating compensation agreement. If you're listing a property, you may want to consider having this filled out. If the seller agrees to pay a buyer's agent, have this filled out, ready in your loop. Because as a listing agent, you're getting called from all those showing agents asking if the seller's going to pay you, and you want to have this ready to go filled out so you can just share it with the agent so you can make that happen faster. So I think that's the suggestion, is go ahead and do this, and it is in your listing loops templates right now. So have this ready to go, part of your listing presentation, and then when they call you, you just send it to the agent in dot loop for them to sign. If you're calling an agent, be looking for this, be asking for this to ensure your compensation. Yeah.
Quick question. If other firms have a website where it shows compensation there too, are we still doing this even though they have that?
Yeah.
So when
Wait,
go ahead.
Leon, go ahead.
So when we fill out the 220 form for us and then the buyer asks for it, they will fill in their part themselves, right? And then
Yep,
that's it, right?
Yep, that's right. You just fill it out in advance, Leon, and then when they call to make the appointment, you can send that right over to them. They'll fill out their part. Okay.
And as a reminder in the blue note, all bold and in caps, it says, do not upload this form to MLS. So we got to have it dot loop your email or somewhere we can get it to them when they call.
Yes.
I was just reading that because isn't it either or, so the seller signs or the listing firm signs, right? For the compensation. So say if I'm. So
You got
got
everybody signing.
Everybody signing.
The listing firm or seller have to agree to compensate you. And to that point, you guys note here next to fee, it says check only one, seller or listing firm is paying you. So you could have a case where the seller's paying you 1.5 and the listing firm's paying you 1.5. That means you need 2 of these. That says or. So we're going to have the seller paying us or the listing firm. And if you have a situation where they're both putting in, you're going to have 2 of these.
So if, for instance, on our website, the one like you're listing, they're offering 2. We know the firm is paying that thing. So the firm would sign. Okay.
So we just.
That's right. Okay.
Because I could have sworn I read somewhere that it's either or signs it.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the seller would.
Not.
No, it's who's paying you. Everybody's signing. But we're just
Okay.
saying who, check only one, seller or firm agrees to pay the selling firm, and everybody signs it.
Okay.
So in other words, the seller is
Is
agreed to pay, he's agreed to pay Blue Door Group the total commission. He's
Mhm.
paying the firm,
Okay.
okay?
So then we don't have to have ourselves sign this, right?
Yes.
If they've
Yes.
already signed the seller of the agreement, listing agreement, it says that they're giving us 5%, 2.5 is going, we just have to have.
In my,
You are Billy sign this.
Well, the seller, because the buyer's agent's looking for this.
Right, right. I get
but
that
the
part,
buyer's agent is looking for either the firm to
Or the
sign
seller.
or the seller.
Yeah.
It
If the-
doesn't give us options in the signature boxes.
I just want to write that on the MLS. It's either or sign the firm or the seller, not both.
I'll look it up and I'll let y'all know that.
That pops up on the
Oh,
thing.
yeah, I got them all printed right here.
That little, that open tabs on the side.
Yeah. I'll look at that and send it out to everybody and let you know whether it's both or just one.
Okay.
So are we checking listing firms is on this form?
If you
Because it's
know,
coming off
yeah,
our
if you
agreement?
know that that it is coming, that the listing firm right now,
Yeah.
if it is coming to the listing firm is paying. Okay. Now, if I read in here and it says that everybody has to sign, I'm gonna let y'all know that. Okay.
So I don't want to confuse the situation, but the second one, you did not start.
No. And the reason, Kelly, for that is for pre-sales, we offer one compensation, and for completed, we do another. So I would tell you, you could do one that was for pre-sale and one that was, yeah. Just make sure that it's delineated. Okay, yep.
Or we can just do one. Yeah.
Listing
Yeah.
firm, agent name.
Oh, Julie, one other question. It says here, termination thing, what the 2 weeks out there? Is it the date? So let's say we're put it out for like 2 weeks.
For your term.
So, you have a suggestion for that?
Really?
Is it like- That's what I don't understand that.
Aww.
Oh, I think you need to read who that's from. We did the breakfast. Oh, damn. Oh, my goodness.
Point of reference, agent. No,
Right,
Yes.
right.
but the kind of that question is not advice.
It does, yeah.
I'm just wondering with this.
Would that be the listing?
Well, I'm looking at, let's move on. I'll come back to this. I'm reading this now. Okay.
Disclosure of compensation. You do not have this piece of paper. I'm telling when you have the paper. Disclosure of compensation. Again, they just changed the language. It's so technical. The buyer is not just acknowledging, the buyer is acknowledging and consenting. So if we're doing this disclosure of compensation, I think this is the one we use if you're getting more than, so if you're getting that builder bonus, we have to disclose to our client that we're getting paid more than we agreed to. So we use this form to disclose that compensation. And again, they just added that technical piece that the buyer's not just acknowledging, but they're consenting to that as well. So that gives permission for, somebody else to pay us.
Okay, guys, here's the answer on this. You're only checking one. And the reason for this is because there are which it says here, the seller may be paying the buyer's broker direct. When does that happen? Maybe it's a FSBO, okay? And the seller is paying that fee direct to that firm, right? So at that point, who's signing this form? The seller, right? But if Jess has an agent from another company showing her listing and the seller has already signed the listing agreement, agreeing to 5% and 2.5% is being paid out, then the firm signs because we're already responsible for collecting that total commission. All right. So be aware that most of us are used to the firm signing, saying that we're going to pay.
Can we sign on the firm?
Yes, you can sign for the firm. Okay. So just make sure that you get the firm name at the top and that'll be fine. Okay.
Next piece of paper you have, paper. It's 715. This is new. This is so new. It was done before they did the summary, before they did the actual changes. So this just came within like the last week or so. And this is the one. This is the one that you guys need to do before August 1st. Any existing listings and buyer agency agreements.
This one only exists between now and after August 1st, we'll be using the new buyer agency agreement.
But if you need to update,
under contract, do this prior to August. Under contract.
This is just a notification, Leon. Any buyers you're currently working with, any sellers you currently have a listing agreement with, send this to them, have them sign it, have it in the loop. Okay? Between now and August 1st.
Got it closing August.
No, I'm not working. Is that the one on, no, long as it closes before August 1st.
Closing August 2nd, yes.
Yeah, if it gets delayed, then yes.
this one is not in your templates because again, we just got it. So as you guys are adding it, and this is what I'm going to go over on Tuesday in our loop minutes. But if you have an existing loop and you need to add this, you can just add it from a template and then find it from the 2024-2025 NCAR forms. So under templates, it's 2024-2025 NCAR forms, and you're looking to add form 715. And that's what I'm going to go over on Tuesday, which is before August 1st. So if you're not sure how to do that, please plan on coming to the dot loop meeting on Tuesday, knowing that we got to get some of these things done.
Pam, we'll get you up to speed. You're good. You're good. You're good.
I can have.
That's right.
Everybody good with this one? This is your to-do list, part of your to-do list. Just come see me Tuesday and we'll walk through it step by step. Okay? Virtually. We'll walk through it step by step. Thank you. The last one, are we good with 220? We hashed all that out? Okay. The last one, no change, no paper. Just look at the screen. This is just a reminder that we have an agency agreement renewal and or amendment. So if you do a buyer agency for a day in a property, you can amend that for another day in another property. If you want to change that commission, you can amend that listing agreement. This form has not changed, but I think it's getting ready to play a bigger role. So our agency agreement renewal and or amendment, you can see we can change either the expiration date, price if it's a listing agreement. I think what we're going to see using most is that other. So are we changing the property, changing the agency date, you know, compensation, things like that. I think it's much cleaner and easier to use this form than redoing the entire listing agreement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you guys.
This is 710.
Yeah, you don't want to redo all those forms.
This is in your templates.
710.
You have this in your templates when you create loops.
This is the form that if your seller decides to change their compensation for some reason, and you want Julie to put it on the website, this is the
The other
form. Yeah, that person there. If you want Jeb to change it on the website, make sure that that form gets done.
So they got an and or on this one. I could name them and or on the cooperative.
Too easy.
Yeah, that would be too easy. Gotta remember there are attorneys involved in all of this. And we'd be putting them out of the job.
In some cases, those that don't do closings on the regular, so yeah. That's all the agency paperwork. Any questions or anything?
On that 220 form?
220.
Where is that termination, where it says a termination on that?
Okay, when you have a buyer agency agreement, and let's say you make it out for 3 days in the beginning, and then you renew it because you and the buyer decide you like each other. Okay, so you renew that buyer agency agreement for another 2 months. Okay, it goes under contract. You go under contract. And maybe you've got a month left on your buyer agency agreement, but it's going to be 6 weeks before you close. You've got to renew all these things to go out to the end of the transaction. So in other words, you would amend the buyer agency agreement for 2 more weeks, and you would make sure that your compensation agreement is reflected that way. Okay. Yeah, just make sure that your dates coincide, your end date coincides with when you think the transaction will be over.
So basically,
Yeah, that's right. Okay. All right.
Sometimes they move to the next day.
Yes. So what I'd recommend, Leon, is if you say, okay, Jerry's got a closing date August 1st, he does a renewal, I might make it for August 4th to give myself some wiggle room. Yeah. There you go.
We don't be changed it. 220.
in 2 weeks.
Do it.
They'll cover my.
No, what Billy's saying is the contract gives you 7 days of like a 7-day grace period. So if you renew, just make sure that your buyer agency agreement is renewed. Okay, guys, just renew the agreements. Just renew them. Okay.
We're
When in
looking,
doubt.
looking for a clear paper trail here. We're looking for a clear paper trail. Like if anybody picks your file up, can they see the steps, see the progress, see the process of it?
That's because Billy's fault.
I just heard that this is very overwhelming, a lot of paperwork, and you're right, which is why you have the summary. Everything we're talking about here today, you have in your hand in 5 little pages. We're just showing you the changes. So use this as your guide. And remember, I'm emailing this to you so you can click on the link and see the markup. Is it a lot? Yeah, this was a big year for forms. This is why they provide us this to help us absorb it all.
I know that this seems overwhelming right now, guys, but it will get cleaner and easier as we go along. But you just have to understand that it's no different than anything else. For those of us that were around when agency wasn't even around, and then agency came around, we all thought, my God, we can't do this. Well, here we are still doing it. So you will get through this. You'll be fine. You just have to take it one bite at a time. Okay? It's gonna be okay. And we
3 now.
Yes.
Julie at openthebluedoor.com.
That's right. It's all gonna be okay.
Jody.
Okay. It's all gonna be okay. Are we?
One more question about 220. I know
Yep.
it's 224. Because it says at the top on
means that the seller is represented by a licensed real estate.
Mhm.
So
And
it's
now
not.
we still have our unrepresented
Yeah,
self.
we have our
form,
unrepresented
yep.
form. You're exactly right. Yeah, yeah,
So you wouldn't be.
yeah.
That's not represented.
One of the big settlement terms that the attorneys all required was that they did not want it to be something where a seller felt coerced to pay a firm a certain amount of money to pay a buyer's agent. So they said the seller can pay directly. So Pam takes a listing and the seller says, Pam, I'll pay you 3% to market my house, but I'm not paying anything else to you. If you get an offer from a buyer's agent, I'll negotiate a fee with them, right? At that point, then that compensation would be checked for the seller, okay? Because the seller could then pay that direct, which is different than what we've done, right? Okay, guys, all you got to do is pick up the phone and call one of us. While we're getting through this, there's going to be lots of questions. Okay, just remember between now and August 1st, Julie gave you 3 things you got to go do. Those are the 3 things you need to focus and worry about for now. Okay, for now. All right, do we have one last form?
Anything else on agency? Before we move on to contracts. Good on agency.
We just got 2 more things, guys. Hang tight, hang tight.
The only thing you're not gonna find on the summary page is 710 because it's nothing new. We're just refreshing you of this form because we're gonna be seeing it used a lot more. So 710, you may want to jot that down. And it is in your templates. All right, on to contracts. A couple changes with 2T. Again, nothing crazy. They added
Days are 14 days. That's what they added.
No, that's the 800. Okay, so with the due diligence fee, they added that same verbiage we just saw in the listing agreement about who is going to get that due diligence fee, who we're going to pay that to. Are we paying it to all 8 sellers or just the 2? So they just now have the contract reflecting that information. Probably one of the bigger changes they made to the contract this year, we now have some options for our due diligence date. We can either put in a specific date like we've always done, or we can put in a number of days. So we can say due diligence is for 10 days. If we look at the last page of that boilerplate page of the contract, it reminds us how to count days. So with contract days, a day is a day is a day. Sunday counts, Christmas counts, a day is a day is a day. Also, day 1 is the day after the effective date, the day after receipt. So if we get this, if we go under contract today, that's our effective date. Tomorrow is day 1 and so on until we get to day 10. I'm a little nervous about this new option because I think a lot of people don't know how to count days. So that's why that's spelled out in the contract, right? So either use a specific number, and again, we got an or here, or a number of days of due diligence.
I will tell you her nervousness. I just wrote up an offer this weekend. I know y'all were surprised. I was excited. I wrote up an offer and I did 45 days. She came back and said, well, that's August 26th. I said, no, go back and count again. It's September 4th. Okay. So you will need to make sure that you are counting every day, you know, from the day after it being effective. So it will definitely come up. Make sure everybody understands what those days are.
Why would you not?
You could, But if I didn't know when I was gonna get a ratified contract back, yeah, because somebody, it could take them 3 days to get it back to me. And my days are ticking, right? So I put in 45 days from the time I get a ratified contract back. Okay, well, this was land, so it was a little different. Oh,
Yes. And guess what, we're gonna close early.
good.
You know, for the settlement, we still have to put in a date, so we're not doing a number of days, that's just for the due diligence. So that's one change in 2T.
I have a question on that due diligence fee, and I was working on the bill 2 weeks ago. And they did a memo, I never done one really what they wanted to, but the agent couldn't wait until my client came back she couldn't wait from Friday to Monday. Venmo the guy, I said, I cannot, legally, I cannot get the wire information, and I cannot give you any Venmo information, because to me, that's still a wire. So the agent got a little.
And we can't, you can't, and we can't accept it for them.
Right. So what happened was my client called the guy and they talked through. She wanted to make sure she had the right Venmo account. Wired the money over, only to find out it was his business account and it took out an additional charge.
You bet.
And so she said, so then he comes to me, well, I want my money. And she said, well, you should have given me the right information. So then they ended up doing something different that I was not aware of until day later.
Yeah, I would not do Venmo or any of those for these deposits, guys, because they are all wanting to charge now fees if they think it's a business transaction. So I would not do that. And we can't account for that money. So you cannot accept those deposits into your own personal Venmo. Okay.
But anyway, they got it straight. Oh, and she said, I will see half that when you send me mine. So they worked it out. And she said, after she had a bottle of wine and did a little custody, everything worked out. Yeah, I love my clients.
Okay, Julie.
I was looking to see, I thought I saw something about that, but I'm not seeing now where it is. But I do think I saw that address about if we're gonna do Venmo, who's gonna incur those fees. I want to say I've seen that somewhere, but I can't tell you right now. All right, due diligence.
Definitely a conversation to have with buyers, your buyer before anything. They're expecting to send money one way and they can't do it.
That's right.
Again, the wetland water hazard that we saw reflected in the listing agreement, they've just updated the offer to purchase and contract. Let's see, this is a brand new paragraph. Talking about the sellers to provide the HOA information to the closing attorney. So I guess there were problems with closing attorneys getting HOA information, who to communicate, who to refer to. So they put it, this is pretty much here for the closing attorneys. Now it's in the contract and agreement between buyers and sellers to help the attorney get that. And then the government compliance thing, you guys remember they just added that. So they just added that last year. So they just tweaked it just a little bit because, we got to use it sometimes to see how it works out. So after some of the changes, they just wanted to emphasize that the buyer's burden is to establish the violation of the government compliance as part of the buyer's due diligence to find that governmental compliance thing. They let the seller know, give the seller the opportunity to fix it, to cure it. And then if they don't, the buyer may have the choice to terminate. So they're just kind of emphasizing that is on the buyer to find that governmental compliance. The guidelines to 2T have also been updated. So again, reference those. And guidelines to anything are a good tool, and they're all available in our NCAR forms.
By the way, the templates, Julie has labeled those 24, 25 out in .loop. So please make sure you are going to the proper templates. Okay.
And we'll look at it on Tuesday. I'm gonna plug Susanna. You know what? I just put this in because I love this and I forget about it until they do the forms, until they update it. This is available for us. It's just an overview of the contract. I think this could be a good tool to help the buyer or seller understand the contract. Instead of handing them a 17-page document saying, read this, this is just a 5-page overview.
That'd be good in a buyer package.
Buyer package,
Which one?
780. Do you want it in template?
Yeah.
I'll put it in the template.
Julie will put it in the template.
If
for
it
you.
isn't already, it might be. I might have made that decision.
That'd be great, Julie.
But I think again, is we're trying to understand it, but more importantly, is we're trying to explain it to buyers and sellers, especially buyers with due diligence. They really don't like hearing that. So this just kind of helps with that. So I was reminded of it. I want to remind you guys of it as well. Then we have 12T, which is our vacant lot and land. And really the big change with 12T, let me make sure that I speak. The big change with 12T, other than the other changes we saw in the offer to purchase and contract, the big change with 12T now is that there's a new form to go with it. And it's addressed, here it is, no. It's addressed down here. We're going to look at the new form in just a second, but it's called the Vacant Land Disclosure Act. Excuse me, the Vacant Land Disclosure Statement. It's mimicking the R codes. So we're asking the seller for information to disclose information about the vacant lot and land. So we're referencing it here, you know, buyer has received, buyer has not received, in which case they may have the opportunity to terminate their contract as they do with the R codes. The new form then has been added to our land templates. So buyer land, seller land templates. And again, it's a seller disclosure on the land, brand new form.
That's great. If I had a plan now,
Yep.
Yeah, you gotta get that updated. That's a good question.
But you can see we're doing the same thing, the physical aspects of the land and the seller's representing yes, no, no representation. It's very, very R codes-esque. And now it's going to go out on me. Yeah. Land use, survey, you know, that kind of thing. So if you're using 12T, you now have another disclosure, and it is in the land templates.
I guess if you have a buyer or buying contract, you could send this to the listing agent, ask them to provide.
I'm doing it now.
Well, yeah, that would be great if you can get it. You know, I will tell you, if you've got land listed, you need to go ahead and get that done. Get it in the loop and ready to go. If you want to try to get it, if you've got land under contract now, go ahead and send it off to the listing agent, but you may or may not get it. Okay.
Good on that.
Ready for new homes?
Now we're ready for new homes, and Jody's got it from it. That's the last piece of paper you have in your handout. And we printed out the whole 800T because I think Jody has something to say about everything. So I just printed the whole thing out. So there you go.
So
do you want to see it here too?
No, it doesn't have to be up there. Guys, the big thing I want to say to you about the 800T, which is the new construction offer to purchase, versus the 2T, which is what you all use now all the time. Okay. The 2T tells the buyer they are accepting the property in its present condition. So if you have a buyer buying a property, a new construction house that is not done yet, is it wise to use the 2T? No. And there are many agents out there, including listing agents of new construction, who will say, we don't need to use the 800T. Well, if you're representing a buyer, I'm telling you, you better use the 800T if the house isn't done, okay? Because you are doing a disservice to that buyer client. The 2T is only used if a house is complete, okay? That buyer is accepting it in its current condition. All right, so that's number one about the whole 800T versus 2T. All right. The next thing I'm going to tell you about this new 800T, which I told Julie, I'm actually kind of glad that agents don't know what's in the 800T because this one just changed completely. Okay. This 800T, the new one now, is very heavily protective of buyers. There will not be a builder out there that will sign this now. I'm just saying, guys, because that's what we do a lot of here. Okay. This new 800T requires the builder to do one of a number of things that they will not agree to up front. It requires them to put in a radon system. If there is radon, and I'm going to tell you, if builders out there get a radon level of 4.2, they are not putting in a system without doing another test because it could have rained that day. Okay. So that builder won't sign that. And it doesn't give them an option in this new contract. The other thing this new contract does is it says that for year one, the builder will come back and fix anything that's wrong with the house. Year one, again, won't be signing it. So what you need to get prepared for is that all these builders out there now are going to have their own contracts. They're all going to go get them drafted because they're not going to want to sign this one. All right. The other thing that's very different about this form now is that you can no longer use the 800T if the buyer you're working with owns their own land. This contract is only applicable if the builder owns the land and is going to convey the whole package over to the buyer. It says it at the top of the agreement. Okay. So now what that also means is if you have a buyer looking to build on their land, you probably are going to want to call and say, Jody, I need some help because I need to know what builder I can use that has their own agreement that will pay me. Okay? Because not all builders are created equal. All right? That does not mean that if a builder has their own agreement that the buyer doesn't have the right to have their own attorney look at it. That's perfectly fine. Because most builders' agreements do tend to lay more heavily in their favor. But at the same time, it doesn't tie them down to set things that this agreement is. And I can tell you right up front, the builders that I represent will never sign this agreement. So they will all have their own contracts moving forward. Okay. So you're going to have to be ready for that. And if you're not sure about what the agreement looks like, all you got to do is call. We'll talk about it. Okay. The other thing I will tell you, because there's a whole lot more in here, like they want everything attached. They want plans, specs. They want everything attached that the builder has on the property attached to this agreement. They want allowances, schedule of allowances. They want everything. Okay. So they have made this new contract prohibitive to you using it. Okay. So here's the good news for you though. If you're representing a buyer and you are looking at new houses that are not done, first thing you need to do before you start showing, after you get buyer agency signed, is ask if the builder has their own contract. Okay. If they do, get a copy of it so that your buyer can go ahead and start looking over it, and so can you. All right. If they say no, he or she does not have their own agreement, and you know that that house is not done yet, then you will be using this 800T. The good news is it heavily protects your buyer. Okay. So as far as a buyer client is concerned, this is good for them. If you're a listing agent like me, they're not going to sign because I'm not going to let them. So you need to make sure that you understand, because a lot of listing agents out there don't get it. They don't understand. If you work with a listing agent who says, oh, sure, don't worry, just send me over whatever, fill this puppy out and send it on. Because I promise you it protects your buyer. Okay. But it also asks for some very specific exhibits on page 1. And the builder may say, well, I'm not giving you all of that. Okay. Then you won't be using this form. There's going to be a lot of builders out there who are going to be sucking wind without an agent that knows how to advise them. Okay. So I would tell you right now, looking at new construction, ask first if they have their own contract. Get a copy of it, read it. Okay. They do not have their own agreement. You cannot use the 2T unless a CO, a certificate of occupancy, has been issued on the house, period. So that leaves you with this form. This is it. So I would encourage you to read it, make sure you understand. You will see that it very much protects the buyer client, and that's great. Just be prepared that you might get pushback from an agent and a builder saying, I'm not doing this. This is your only option. You don't have any other options now. None. So your response to that agent will be, I get it. I understand that this document has changed substantially, but we don't have any other form to use. If your builder wants to have their own contract, get me a copy of it. I'll be happy to go over it with the buyer. But if you check with your broker in charge or NCAR, you'll find this is it. This is our only option that we have. So don't be the bad guy, just be the factual person out there that just says we don't have any other option but to use this form. Okay. If your builder that you're working with understands this, if you're listing a home for a builder, I would suggest that you go over this contract with them closely and say, this is what we'll be using if we sell the house prior to a CO. You may have the builder say, well, then we won't be selling it until we get it finished. That's their right, their option to do that. Okay. If they understand what's in here and what they're obligated to, fine. It's just about being transparent, making sure everybody understands what's what. Okay. They have changed some terminology about the fees. You know, instead of builder deposit, it's called construction fees. There is still a pre-exam period, which is different than the 2T. The pre-exam period is allowing for things like to make sure that septic permits have been received, to make sure that everything that would be necessary for building the house has actually been accomplished. So maybe the pre-exam period is set for 2 months. And at the end of, 6 weeks, we still don't have a building permit and you're representing a buyer. At that point, then you may want to extend the pre-exam period because that's what protects any earnest deposits. Okay. Any deposits would be protected under the pre-exam period. Construction fees, AKA builder deposits, are non-refundable. they will be credited to them at closing, those deposits. But if a buyer comes in and wants to make a lot of changes to a new home, that customizes it, the builder says, fine, but I'm going to require 20% in a builder deposit or construction fees. They're not getting that back if they terminate the contract, unless that builder defaults. Okay. So understand the main differences here are we don't have any choice about what we use now if the house is not done. This is it, unless the builder has their own contract. And I would say that you probably see a lot of them jump out there and get one drafted once they actually read this. Okay. The second thing to remember is that pre-exam period kind of serves as your due diligence. Okay. And also, this form is heavily weighted towards the buyer. That's great if you're representing the buyer. Just make sure that everybody understands if you're on the list side, like for me now, I'll be talking to a couple of builders saying, okay, I need you to read this because this is our only option unless you want to have your own drafted. Okay. So I would encourage you to know the difference because a lot of agents don't understand the difference between the two. All right. The lab, yes.
What the new construction, I understand what you're saying, but what about if you rent it at home, when you listen to the MLS prior to the CO, but when you talk about the other way, does my people, my seller have to have their own contract go up for that?
No, I don't think you need to do that. I guess a lot of it would depend, Leon, if you plan to sell that remodel before it's done.
Yes.
If you're gonna put it under contract before it's done, you can't use the 2T. So you'd have to use this.
And my guy want to do that.
Well, then he's gonna have to have his own agreement. Yep. Or wait until you get the CO. Yep. You got two options. He either has his own agreement or he waits until the CO is issued. Okay. It's kind of creates some limitations for us in some respects. If I was a flipper who just wanted to, buy one, remodel, and sell, what I would do is if I did it for a living and did a lot of them, I'd have my own agreement. I'd just go ahead and have my own agreement, get the attorney to draft it. Okay. And you can take the 2T to them and say, we need a lot of this language in the agreement, but we're not going to provide we're not going to do some of this stuff. Okay. So, I have some examples I can give you for that. All right. All right. So to review, because it's been a lot today. 3 things you've got to get done between now and August 1st. What are they? Put the agent full commission sheet in your loop. That making sure that you've got documentation that you're going to get paid. Okay. 3 forms, 715 for everybody, 220 if you're under contract, and the agent full from MLS. Get that all done now between now and August 1st and in your loops. Okay. What am I doing tomorrow for each of you? Setting up a loop for buyer prospects so that you can create a folder and start keeping your buyer agency agreements and you're working with real estate in there until you go under contract. Okay. All right. After August 1, what goes away? Compensation field and buyer agency. Do not assume that somebody showing your listing is a buyer's agent. Remember, that's going away now in MLS. They might be acting as a seller sub-agent. So don't make assumptions. All right?
So that means back with the NRS, we move that ourselves or they do that?
No, they're going to do it automatically. Okay, it's going to be gone. Okay. After August 1, if you get a new listing, what are you going to do for Elizabeth?
You want to send them the email address, buyer incentive again.
Correct. Along with, if you give her the address, that'd be great. Just make sure that goes to what email? There you go. Okay. Make sure she has that so that she can do the manual entry. If you can do it through .loop, all the better, but please send it to compliance. If you are going to have to sign a buyer agency agreement for 2 days, what are you going to use to extend it? Agency renewal and amendment. What's the number on that form? 710. Okay, very good. All right. The difference between the 2T and the 800T? One's finished and one's not. 2T, we're accepting it. 800T, we're not there yet. Right? Okay. What other questions do you have? Buyer presentation packages. If you do not have yours done, please get with Billy or myself to talk about that. We've seen a couple good pieces today that could go in. That closing checklist that Julie showed you would be really good to go in. The NC Realtors contract overview, really good to go in your buyer package. Okay. What are the 3 things a buyer wants most? Selection. Say it again. Smooth process. And the best price. Well, everybody in this room, we already know has that one covered. All right, so we know they want those 3 things. So does our buyer package need to show them how you do that, right? Okay, because we need to show them, not tell them, okay? They don't know you well enough to trust you yet. If you're just saying it out your mouth, I don't know you. That's just you telling me something. I need to show you. Prove it. So give me something in writing that illustrates you know what you're doing. Okay? So we need to get those buyer packages done. If you're not ready, get with us so that we can talk about it. All right? All right? What other questions? I know it's overwhelming, but at this point, guys, you really are in good shape. You're so much better off than the average bear out there right now. So don't sweat it. Don't get afraid. Remember, your pie just got bigger. And that's exciting. Okay? This business, we're in sales. Sales isn't fair. It never has been. It's not for the faint of heart. If you want to make good money in sales, you adapt, you learn, you keep going, right? And that's what we're doing in here, right? All right. Call us with any questions. I think we are good. We have one more thing for you. If you guys have any questions about, okay, well, it's all cold now. So if you want to take any of the food home, please get some, take it home.